Ever feel like some heroes just don't get the recognition they deserve?
I know what you mean.
Well, today we're diving into the world of clinical scientists in India. They're doing amazing work, but they're facing some big challenges. We're looking at a document from the National M.Sc Medical Teachers Association. They use the abbreviation NMMTA.
Oh, the NMMTA, right?
And they're really pushing for changes in how clinical scientists are treated in India.
And it's not just about one profession, is it? This goes deeper into the whole medical education system in India.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is fascinating.
They point out that even with the shift from the Medical Council of India, the MCI, to the National Medical Commission, the NMC, there are still issues.
Lots of them.
Especially with how Indian medical colleges rank globally.
It's true. We have so many medical colleges in India, but none of them reach the top 100 globally.
It makes you think, right?
It really does.
About the support system, the resources, everything. And speaking of support, the NMMTA document brings up a good point. You know how fields like, say, dentistry or nursing have their own councils?
Right, to represent them, set standards.
Exactly. But other crucial areas like physiotherapy or lab technology, they don't.
Which leaves them vulnerable, wouldn't you say?
Definitely vulnerable.
While there's been talk of a central council for allied healthcare professionals, it's not quite there yet,
Not fully functional, no.
It's a work in progress, for sure.
A lot of bureaucratic hurdles, it seems like.
Oh, absolutely.
And then on top of that, we have the Clinical Establishments Act.
Right, trying to bring some order to how healthcare institutions are regulated.
But even that, the NMMTA points out, its implementation is different everywhere.
Yeah, varies from state to state.
So much complexity. Different regulations, different councils, different levels of support.
It's a lot to navigate, that's for sure.
Before we get into the specifics of the challenges,
okay,
let's define who we're talking about here. What is a clinical scientist?
A great question.
What makes them different from a doctor?
A lot of confusion surrounds that, actually. Many people don't even know about them, about this crucial part of healthcare.
Really?
Oh, yeah. In India, usually a clinical scientist has a medical Master of Science degree.
That's the M.Sc, right?
Yes, M.Sc. And it's awarded by health universities, specifically under the Faculty of Medicine.
Interesting. So they're getting their degrees from medical colleges.
Exactly.
Just like a lot of doctors do.
Right. And many of them go on to get Ph.Ds.
Wow.
In medical specialties, which makes them incredibly qualified experts.
So rigorous training, just like the doctors we're all familiar with.
Absolutely.
And within clinical science, are there different specializations?
Oh, absolutely. You'll find them in microbiology labs, analyzing blood for infections. Others might be developing new diagnostic tests, maybe with a background in biochemistry.
So essential.
It's a diverse field, very important for patient care.
And are they involved in teaching too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The NMMTA, they really emphasize how crucial clinical scientists are to medical education, especially with the shortage of teachers for those non-clinical MBBS subjects.
It's true. Imagine the impact if they weren't there to train future doctors.
It would be huge.
Unsung heroes, almost. We rely on their expertise, but they often don't get the same recognition.
Sadly, that's very true.
And that lack of recognition, it leads to real challenges.
It does.
And the NMMTA document really digs into those. They break it down into three main areas: teaching, diagnostics, and research.
3 pillars of struggle, you could say.
Okay, so we've set the stage. We understand who clinical scientists are. We see their importance in healthcare. Now let's take a closer look at those 3 pillars, starting with teaching. What are some of the roadblocks clinical scientists are facing in the classroom?
Well, for a long time, medical MSA grads, they've been key to teaching those non-clinical subjects, filling a gap,
Right, because there's a shortage of other teachers for those subjects.
Exactly. But the rules about who can teach, they keep changing.
So it's hard for them to build a stable career.
Exactly. It's like...
The document mentions these TEQ guidelines.
Yeah.
What are those about?
TQ, that's Teachers' Eligibility and Qualification, set by the MCI, the Medical Council of India.
Right, the MCI.
They decide who's qualified to teach in medical colleges, and initially they allowed a certain percentage of non-medical professionals, which is how they see clinical scientists, with the MSc degree.
So they were allowed to teach, but now...
But then with the NMC taking over...
Like the National Medical Commission.
There's been this push to reduce that percentage, even phasing them out completely from some subjects.
Oh, wow. So even though they've been teaching effectively, they could lose their jobs.
It's a real concern, yes.
What's behind that change?
Well, the document seems to suggest There's pressure from groups representing doctors with M.D. degrees.
So MDs want those teaching positions.
Seems like it. They want to secure those roles for themselves.
But is that about quality, really? Or just,
Turf wars. It's a valid question. The NMMTA certainly thinks so.
And what about the students? If experienced clinical scientists are pushed out,
Exactly. The NMMTA worries about that too.
it has to impact the quality of education.
They say it deprives students of valuable perspectives, specialized knowledge.
It's counterintuitive, don't you think? Limiting the pool of qualified educators.
It really is, especially in medicine. You'd think they'd want the best of the best teaching.
Absolutely. And it sounds like this isn't just about teaching positions.
You're right. The NMMTA highlights another issue.
What's that?
They're being kept out of training programs.
You mean professional development?
Yes, the ones that would further their skills and knowledge.
So they're being penalized for having a different but equally rigorous career path.
That's a good way to put it. They're being shut out.
And this doesn't end in the classroom, right?
Sadly, no. It spills over into diagnostics as well.
Which is where I'd imagine they're really in their element. With their lab work, analysis, all that.
Absolutely, it's crucial.
So what's happening there? What challenges are they facing?
Remember how we talked about clinical scientists in those labs? Analyzing samples, running tests.
Especially those specializing in biochemistry, microbiology.
Exactly, they're vital. Making sure those results are accurate.
Which is so important for accurate diagnosis, treatment.
Absolutely. And the National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories, NABL.
NABL.
They recognize the clinical scientists' degrees. They say they're qualified to sign off on lab reports.
Which makes sense. But the MCI,
There it is.
they disagree.
There's been this back and forth, a lot of confusion.
So even though the lab standards body says they're qualified,
The medical council makes it difficult.
what's their reasoning?
It's complicated. The MCI, they recognized the qualifications back in 2005,
Okay.
but reversed their decision in 2017.
Wow. Why?
Pressure from lobbying groups, apparently.
That's frustrating. So they have the education, the skills, the experience, the endorsement of the accreditation body even.
They do. But they're still denied opportunities.
It's just not right.
The NMMTA, they've been fighting for their rights, of course, but many labs, they still operate under the old rules.
So those clinical scientists can't even apply for those positions.
It's like they're stuck. Denied signatory roles, positions as biochemists, microbiologists.
Pushed to the margins of their own field.
Exactly. And some of them, they have to take positions below their qualifications
Lab technicians, things like that.
just to make ends meet. It's disheartening.
Overqualified and undervalued.
That sums it up perfectly.
We've covered teaching, diagnostics. That leaves research.
Right.
You'd think that's where their advanced degrees would be most valued.
You would, wouldn't you? Not according to the NMMTA. They're pretty upfront about it, actually.
About,
The lack of research opportunities.
really? I'm surprised. I would have thought that's where they'd thrive.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? With their training.
What's the main roadblock?
Well, funding's a big one, of course. Research in India, it's always a struggle for funding.
Makes sense.
But it goes beyond that. The NMMTA, they see a clear bias.
A bias. Against whom?
Clinical scientists, of course. When it comes to research positions, grants. MDs are usually preferred.
So even in research, which is all about pushing boundaries, discovering new things, that bias for certain credentials still exists.
It's disheartening, but it's there. And it hurts everyone, really. Limits the scope of research,
Because you're missing out on their unique perspective.
Exactly. Different backgrounds lead to different approaches, different questions even.
Diversity is important everywhere, but especially in science.
Absolutely. And to make matters worse,
There's more.
the NMMTA found that even when clinical scientists do get research positions, they often face a pay gap.
Compared to MDs.
Yeah, even with similar experience, qualifications.
It's like they're constantly having to prove themselves.
It's a real struggle, according to the NMMTA.
So what can be done? What does the NMMTA suggest?
They're pushing for some concrete action from the government specifically.
What are they asking for?
3 main things. First, they want the medical M.Sc degree reinstated.
Under the NMC.
Exactly.
Right.
Remember we talked about it being removed from the Indian Medical Council Act.
Yeah, like their whole field was just gone.
They want that reversed. They want their qualifications recognized.
Makes sense. What else?
They want a dedicated council for clinical scientists.
Like the ones for dentists, nurses?
Precisely. A platform to advocate for their needs, set standards for the profession.
That seems fair.
And lastly, they want a clear policy for research. One that includes clinical scientists provides funding.
So they can contribute on an equal footing with MDs.
Exactly. It's about utilizing all of India's talent pool, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's not about one profession over another. It's about lifting up healthcare as a whole.
Well said. And the NMMTA really emphasizes that. It's about maximizing India's potential in research, diagnostics, everything.
It's inspiring in a way. They're facing these huge challenges, but they're still so focused on the bigger picture.
They're fighting for the future of healthcare in India.
And that's something we should all be invested in. It's a good reminder that progress takes many forms. And sometimes it's about recognizing the unsung heroes.
The ones working tirelessly behind the scenes.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, the question we leave you with is this. How can we support IL healthcare professionals? How do we create a system that values their expertise? Those are questions worth pondering. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and keep learning.